When the people who should love you don't understand you. Stoicism and emotional rejection. Rejection is already difficult to face. But when it comes from those we expected to support us, family, lifelong friends, or someone who once claimed to love us, the pain cuts much deeper. We're not talking about criticism from strangers, but the kind of wound that opens when someone close to us doesn't see us, doesn't hear us, or worse, misjudges who we are. It's a silent scream from within. If even they don't understand me, who will? In this video, we'll dive into one of the most painful and often hidden emotional experiences, being misunderstood by the people who were supposed to know us best. Stoicism might seem at first glance too cold or rational to deal with something this personal, but in reality, this ancient philosophy offers more than just logic. It offers emotional armor. It teaches us how to remain firm without becoming hard, how to love without becoming dependent, and how to stay kind even when kindness isn't returned. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal within his own family. Seneca was exiled by the very man he loyally served. Epictetus lived as a slave and still discovered inner freedom. These men weren't removed from reality. They suffered deeply, just like we do, but their philosophy gave them something we all need: clarity and strength in the face of emotional pain. So in this video, we'll explore how to stay calm, dignified and virtuous when we're judged, ignored, or pushed aside by those we love. We'll reflect on how Stoicism can help us stop seeking external validation to define who we are, and instead, root our self-worth in our own conscience. If you've ever felt invisible, misread, or unfairly treated by people who should have stood by your side, this message is for you. And perhaps by the end, you'll discover that the most powerful kind of understanding is the one that starts from within. 1. The pain of not being seen. When even love fails, there's a kind of pain that doesn't bleed on the outside, but leaves deep internal wounds. The pain of not being understood. When rejection comes from someone distant, it's unpleasant. But when it comes from those we love, a parent, a sibling, a partner, a longtime friend, something deeper inside us begins to question our own worth. We start asking ourselves, maybe they're right about me. Am I really too much? Too sensitive? Not enough? It's as if the very person who should defend us is the one piercing us with silence or judgment. The voice we expected to say, "I'm here for you," instead criticizes or turns away. In those moments, our soul cries out for connection, and the absence of it feels like emotional abandonment. From a Stoic perspective, this kind of pain is real, but it doesn't have to be definitive. What hurts isn't only the rejection, but what it represents: the breaking of a bond we believed was unconditional. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "People exist for one another. Teach them or bear with them." In other words, when we are rejected, we have two choices: to teach with patience or to endure with virtue. Stoicism reminds us that suffering grows when we place our peace in the hands of others. When we believe we'll only be whole if someone else accepts us, we become emotional hostages to their opinion. And that, as Epictetus would say, is the true prison, depending on something we cannot control. But there is another way, and it begins with a decision: to stop expecting others to fill the spaces only we can strengthen from within. Through self-knowledge and emotional autonomy, we begin to see rejection not as a sentence but as an opportunity for deeper understanding of ourselves. Seneca, Unspoken expectations, the invisible weight we place on others. Much of the pain of not being understood comes from something we rarely recognize: unspoken expectations. We expect our parents to support us, our siblings to defend us, our closest friends to know what we're feeling, even when we've never clearly expressed it. And when those people don't act the way we silently hoped, we feel betrayed. But did they really betray us? Or did we assign them a role they never knew they were playing? Stoic philosophy challenges us to look at this with honesty. Seneca said, "Most of our suffering comes from unrealistic demands. Expecting someone to understand us without us ever truly revealing ourselves is one of those demands. Even in deep relationships, mutual understanding is never guaranteed. People carry their own stories, traumas, limitations, and filters, all of which shape how they see the world and us. It's a tough truth, but many times what we interpret as a lack of understanding is simply the other person being who they are, someone with limited capacity. It doesn't mean they hate us. It doesn't mean they're against us. It may just mean they don't know how to be present in the way we need. And this is where it gets even harder. The more we expect people to be who we idealize, the more frustrated and distant we become from reality itself. Stoicism gives us back our power. It reminds us that we can't control other people's perceptions, but we can control the clarity with which we express who we are. We can choose to open our hearts with firmness, without needing a specific reaction. And if that openness isn't met with receptiveness, we don't have to respond with anger or despair. We can respond with freedom. Freedom from dependence, freedom to understand without needing agreement, freedom to remain true to ourselves, even without applause. A true Stoic doesn't harden their heart, they strengthen it. And that strength reveals itself in the ability to love without being understood, without letting that lack of understanding destroy our essence. 3. Other people's judgments and the identity we choose to carry. When someone judges us, especially someone we love, it's easy to start doubting who we are. A rude comment from a stranger can sting, but when it comes from a parent, a partner, or a close friend, it feels like it cuts to the core of our identity. And in that pain, we begin to wonder, maybe I really am the problem. Maybe I do talk too much. Maybe I'm not enough. Maybe I'm too much. That's the trap. When we don't filter judgment through conscious awareness, we slowly start to reshape ourselves. We begin to act to please others, to stay silent to avoid conflict, to fix parts of us that were never broken, just misunderstood. And over time, we stop being ourselves and start becoming a version we think is more acceptable. Epictetus warned, "If you want to please everyone, prepare to lose yourself." Stoicism teaches us that there is only one judgment that truly matters, the one made by our own reason. This isn't arrogance, it's responsibility. We will be judged no matter what we do, too emotional or too distant, too quiet or too intense, too soft or too strict. Judgment is constant, but choosing which judgments define us is up to us. Stoic firmness isn't pride, it's alignment. It means living in accordance with what you believe in, even when it costs you approval. And in close relationships, that takes a quiet kind of courage. The courage to continue being who you are, even when someone else's look or tone tells you that you're wrong for it. We are not obligated to accept labels that don't fit us. We are not responsible for the emotional projections others place on us. Who we are is shaped by conscious choices, not by other people's misunderstandings. The Stoic understands that being judged is inevitable, but carrying those judgments as truth, that's optional, and that distinction is freeing. Because once we stop trying to prove our worth and start living it, something shifts. The pain of being misunderstood might still exist, but it no longer determines the direction of our life. 4. The armor of virtue, how Stoicism protects your core. When we're misunderstood by people close to us, the most common reaction is to defend ourselves, sometimes with harsh words, sometimes with silence that hurts. We want to prove we're right. We want to be seen, to be validated. But the more we react impulsively, the more we hand over our emotional balance to others. That's where Stoicism steps in, not to numb the pain, but to protect us from being consumed by it. To the Stoics, true protection doesn't come from isolating ourselves from the world. It comes from grounding ourselves in unshakable values. These are the Stoic virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. When we're rejected or misunderstood, these virtues become our compass. Wisdom helps us discern between someone's opinion and the truth about who we are. Courage gives us strength to hold on to our essence despite unfair criticism. Justice reminds us that even when we're hurt, we can still act with integrity. Temperance prevents us from responding with extremes, because someone else's chaos doesn't have to become ours. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are hurt, it is because you have decided to be hurt." It may sound harsh, but it's deeply liberating. It doesn't mean denying the pain. It means not letting the pain control us. We can feel sorrow without becoming sorrow. We can be criticized without becoming the criticism. What defines us isn't what people say. It's how we choose to respond. The Stoic armor doesn't harden your heart. It strengthens it. It helps you keep loving even when that love isn't returned. It gives you the presence to remain whole, even when others respond with absence. And most of all, it gives you a calm no external rejection can break. We don't have to live in constant self-defense. When virtue becomes the center of your life, the need to prove yourself disappears. And in its place comes peace. A peace that doesn't rely on being understood, but on living truthfully. 5. The attachment to approval. How to let go without shutting down. Often, the pain of being misunderstood is tied to something even deeper, our attachment to approval. We want to be accepted, admired, validated, especially by those we love. That seems natural, but it becomes dangerous when our inner peace depends on it. When someone's lack of approval unravels us, it's a sign we've handed them the keys to our emotional stability. The Stoics saw the desire for approval as one of the greatest threats to the soul. According to Epictetus, anything that depends on someone else, especially their approval, is outside our control, and relying on what we can't control leads directly to suffering. This doesn't mean we have to become cold or closed off. It means understanding that real love begins with freedom, not emotional dependence. There's a difference between wanting to be understood and needing to be understood to feel whole. When need takes over, we begin to reshape our behavior, our words, even our beliefs to fit into someone else's preferences. We become an edited version of ourselves, more agreeable, less authentic. And over time, we lose touch with who we really are. Stoicism offers a different path. The path of clear-eyed love. It's possible to love deeply without depending on reciprocity, to wish someone well, even if they don't validate us, to keep our hearts open, without making that openness dependent on someone else's reaction. True emotional freedom begins when we stop living for acceptance and start living with integrity. This doesn't make the pain of rejection disappear, but it transforms that pain into maturity. You begin to realize you don't need to convince anyone to be at peace. Your strength starts coming from within, not from how others respond. And strangely enough, the less you depend on approval, the more authentic and respected your presence becomes. Accepting that not everyone will understand you is an act of courage, but choosing not to close your heart because of it, that's an act of greatness. And that's where the Stoic begins to rise, between the firmness of reason and the generosity of spirit. 6. When silence speaks louder than 1,000 words. There's a kind of misunderstanding that doesn't come through arguments or harsh words, but through silence. A silence that wounds, a gaze that avoids, a constant emotional absence from someone we once believed would always be there. This type of rejection is subtle, but deeply damaging, because it doesn't say, "You're wrong." It says, "You don't matter." And that unspoken message can hurt more than any words. Stoicism, contrary to what many believe, doesn't ask us to suppress our pain. It invites us to face it with clarity. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that the world wouldn't behave the way he wished, and that even so, he could remain unaffected inside. Other people's silence does not define your worth. The absence of a response is not proof that you've failed. In truth, silence can be a mirror. It reflects the other person's limitations, not your lack of value. Someone who remains silent in the face of your vulnerability may not know how to handle their own. Someone who walks away without explanation may be running from themselves, not from you. Stoicism teaches us to see that silence not as a personal offense, but as a sign that not everyone is ready for the depth we carry. This is where one of Stoicism's most powerful tools comes in: emotional distancing with awareness. It's not detachment out of coldness. It's a conscious choice not to absorb someone else's chaos, to realize that their silence doesn't have to become noise inside you, that you can listen to what's not being said without letting it define your inner world. As you cultivate this inner space, something shifts. What once felt like abandonment becomes observation. What once felt like lack becomes maturity. You stop demanding reciprocity and start honoring your own depth. Because in the end, the silence that truly matters is the one within you. The kind of silence that allows peace to grow even when you're not understood. Not a silence of resignation, but of presence. A presence that doesn't need to shout, defend, or convince, because it simply is. And when you reach that state, the world's misunderstanding no longer holds power over your peace. 7. The freedom not to react, a sign of strength, not weakness. When we're not understood, our first instinct is usually to react, to explain, to defend, to justify ourselves. We want to be heard. We want the other person to finally get it. But the more we push for that recognition, the more frustrated we become, because we're asking for emotional coherence from someone who might not have the maturity or capacity to offer it. The Stoics remind us that true freedom lies in not reacting impulsively. Not reacting doesn't mean ignoring or pretending nothing happened. It means choosing your response instead of being controlled by your pain. It's about creating space between what happens and how you respond. And in that space lives your power. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our opinion about them." In other words, it's not the criticism itself or the silence or rejection that shakes us. It's how we interpret it. If we believe being misunderstood means we've failed, then we'll suffer. But if we see it as an opportunity to grow in autonomy, we gain strength. This kind of freedom takes practice. Your mind wants to lash out. Your heart wants to be understood. Your ego wants to be right. But the Stoic soul observes all of this and waits. It asks, will this response bring me closer to my values, or is it just noise from a wounded part of me? Anyone can react. Anyone can raise their voice, shut down, or retaliate. But to remain calm, to stay centered, to not be dragged into emotional chaos, that's maturity. That's virtue in action. The freedom not to react is one of the greatest acts of self-authority. When you choose not to enter someone else's emotional storm, you're no longer their puppet. You're in command of your own inner world, and that kind of control doesn't make you cold, it makes you unshakable. 8. Separating pain from drama. Feeling without being owned by. Pain doesn't mean weakness. Feeling hurt when we're misunderstood by someone we love is deeply human. Stoicism never asks us to pretend we don't feel it, but it does ask something radical. Don't turn that pain into drama. And that distinction can completely change how we experience suffering. Drama begins when pain becomes a story, a loop. When will they ever get me? No one understands me. This always happens to me. These thoughts turn a real emotion into an identity. We move from "this hurts" to "this defines me," from a painful episode to a belief that colors everything. And slowly, our entire sense of self starts orbiting around rejection. Seneca warned us, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Stoicism invites us to practice clear emotional awareness, to fully feel, but without exaggeration. Yes, there's sadness. Yes, there's grief. But we don't need to build a personal narrative of abandonment around it. We can honor the emotion without becoming it. Separating pain from drama means giving your emotions the right size, and not letting them take over the whole house. You can acknowledge what you feel without fusing with it. You are not your sadness. You are not the misunderstanding. You are the awareness that can observe, endure, and grow through it. This is where Stoicism reveals one of its most powerful truths. The soul is sovereign. No matter how much noise surrounds you, within you, there's a quiet place, a center where reason, virtue, and clarity reside. When you build your life from that place, no rejection can shake your foundation. Drama needs an audience. It needs repetition. Pain only needs your presence and honesty to be processed. And when you stop feeding the story of "no one sees me" and start nurturing the root of who you are, something shifts. The pain may still knock at your door, but it won't stay for long. It has no more power over a home that's no longer built on fear or emotional dependency. 9. Being a bridge or a boundary. What to do with those who don't understand you. When someone doesn't understand us, and especially someone close, we face a tough question. Should I keep trying, or should I walk away to protect my peace? Stoicism doesn't give a one-size-fits-all answer. Instead, it offers clarity and inner criteria to help you make that decision with integrity. You don't always need to cut people off, but you also don't have to stay in relationships that constantly diminish you. Marcus Aurelius said, "If the pain is bearable, bear it. If it's not, withdraw calmly." This applies to emotional bonds too. When there's space for growth, dialogue, or mutual respect, even if imperfect, you can choose to be a bridge. A bridge doesn't mean full access. It means being present without losing yourself. It means showing patience, but not tolerating disrespect. It means standing firm in who you are, while staying open to connection when it's possible. But when a relationship becomes a cycle of disrespect, judgment, or emotional manipulation, it may be time to be a boundary. And here's the key. Setting boundaries isn't shutting down your heart. It's preserving it. The Stoic doesn't walk away out of bitterness, but out of clarity. They understand that virtue grows best in fertile soil, not in toxic ground. You can love someone and still say, "I can't keep doing this." You can forgive someone and still create distance. True love doesn't always mean constant presence. It means mutual respect, even from afar. And that respect starts within, realizing that you deserve relationships where you don't have to beg to be seen. Stoicism helps us make hard decisions with calm, not out of anger, but out of alignment. It gives us the courage to say, "I love you, but I can't abandon myself to stay connected to you." And the compassion to understand that not everyone will grow with us, and that's okay. Being a bridge or a boundary is not about right or wrong. It's about asking, is this relationship helping me live my values, or burying them? Sometimes trying to be a bridge for someone who refuses to walk toward you only leads to your own collapse. Other times, building a wall too early closes a door that still had a chance. So the real question is no longer, will they understand me? But rather, am I respecting the space I've worked so hard to build inside myself? 10. When misunderstanding becomes freedom, a new way of being. We've arrived at the most silent, and perhaps most liberating bodily moment of the journey, accepting that being misunderstood is part of life, and that it doesn't diminish who you are. This is not a resigned acceptance. It's a lucid one. A mature understanding that no matter how much you communicate with clarity, compassion, and love, some people will never truly see you, and that's okay. In Stoic philosophy, this is one of the most powerful inner shifts. You stop living to prove, to convince, to please, and you start living from something deeper, the integrity of your soul. Seneca wrote, "A noble soul is not shaken by public opinion. It is enough unto itself." This self-sufficiency is not about isolation. It's about emotional sovereignty. It's the ability to keep going, whole and intact, even when the acceptance you longed for never comes. The pain of being misunderstood can transform. It can become the seed of a deeper freedom, a freedom to be exactly who you are, clear, firm, loving, even if others can't handle your light. Not being understood no longer becomes a crisis. It becomes a mirror. It reflects where others are, not who you are. That's what Stoicism matures in us. A strength that doesn't shout, it sustains. A love that doesn't beg, it radiates. A presence that doesn't need applause, it simply aligns with its values. Being misunderstood is not the end of connection. It can be the beginning of a more honest connection with yourself. The moment you stop needing others to validate your story, you begin to write it from within, with calm, dignity, and truth. And that's where philosophy becomes more than theory. It becomes freedom. You may not be understood by those who were supposed to love you. But the real question now is, are you ready to free yourself without shutting your heart to the world? Because behind that misunderstanding often hides something even deeper, the fear of not being loved for who we truly are. And that fear can either imprison us or awaken us. In our next episode, we'll go even deeper. What happens when love turns into control? when affection comes with guilt, emotional blackmail, or the pressure to be someone you're not. Get ready to explore how Stoicism can help you tell the difference between love and emotional captivity, and how to build relationships that are free, conscious, and aligned with your values. If this message spoke to something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need to hear this today. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Your freedom starts within, and it's unshakable.